I'm Newt Gingrich. I want to thank the people of South Carolina for being so hospitable as a Georgian. It feels good to be back at home in the South, and I look forward to this evening.
And just as Speaker Gingrich surged into contention here in South Carolina, a direct, fresh character attack on the Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, I want to start with that this evening. As you know, your ex-wife gave an interview to ABC News and another interview at the Washington Post, and this story has now gone viral on the Internet. In it, she says that you came to her in 1999, at a time when you were having an affair. She says you asked her, sir, to enter into an open marriage. Would you like to take some time to respond to that?
No, but I will. I think the destructive, vicious, negative nature of much of the news media makes it harder to govern this country, harder to attract decent people to run for public office, and I am appalled that you would begin a presidential debate on a topic like that.
Is that all you want to say, sir?
Let me finish.
Please.
Every person in here knows personal pain. Every person in here has had someone close to them go through painful things. To take an ex-wife and make it 2 days before the primary a significant question in a presidential campaign is as close to despicable as anything I can imagine. My two daughters wrote the head of ABC and made the point that it was wrong, that they should pull it, and I am frankly astounded that CNN would take trash like that and use it to open a presidential debate.
As you noted, Mr. Speaker, this story did not come from our network. As you also know, it is the subject of conversation on the campaign. I get your point. I take your point.
John, it was repeated by your network. You chose to start the debate with it. Don't try to blame somebody else. You and your staff chose to start this debate with it. Now, let me be quite clear. The story is false. Every personal friend I have who knew us in that period says the story was false. We offered several of them to ABC to prove it was false. They weren't interested because they would like to attack any Republican. They're attacking the governor. They're attacking me. I'm sure they'll presently get around to Senator Santorum and Congressman Paul. I am tired of the elite media protecting Barack Obama by attacking Republicans.
As I noted at the beginning, we have 4 podiums on this stage tonight, not 5. And when he exited the race this morning, Governor Perry quickly and forcefully endorsed Speaker Gingrich. And in that remark, he said that, no, Mr. Gingrich is not a perfect man. Senator Santorum, he said none of us are. And he said he believes in his Christian faith. It guides him to the value of redemption. Now, as all of you know, and as everyone in this audience from South Carolina knows, we're in a state with 9.9% unemployment. And Jane asked this question. List 3 or more specific programs that will put American people back to work.
Well, there are 3 things that can be done at a specifically South Carolina level. There's one easy thing to do at a national level, and that's repeal the Dodd-Frank bill, which is killing small business, killing small banks. That would help overnight. But 3 specifics. 1, there's $29 billion plus of natural gas offshore. In Louisiana, jobs for that kind of production are $80,000 a year. That would help us become energy independent from the Middle East. Part of the royalties of natural gas could be used then to modernize the port of Charleston and the port of Georgetown. Charleston has to be modernized to meet the larger ships that will come through the Panama Canal in 2014. 1 out of every 5 jobs in South Carolina is dependent on the port of Charleston. The third thing you could do, frankly, is fundamentally, radically overhaul the Corps of Engineers. The Corps of Engineers today takes 8 years to study, not to complete, to study doing the port. We won the entire Second World War in 3 years and 8 months.
Okay. A subset of the jobs conversation among the candidates in this state over the past week, Mr. Speaker, has been from you and from the now departed Governor Perry, pretty sharp criticism of Governor Romney's tenure as the CEO of Bain Capital. I want you to be specific. What do you think he did wrong that makes you question his ability as a president to create jobs?
I think there are specific cases. Georgetown Steel would be a case here, in a company in Gaffney, South Carolina. The specific cases where Bain Capital's model, which was to take over a company and dramatically leverage it, leave it with a great deal of debt, made it less likely to survive. I think the governor ought to explain. It started because he cited his experience as a key part of his preparation for being president. And so I think the underlying model of that kind of investment, which is very different from venture capital, ought to be explained, and those cases ought to be looked at.
Mr. Speaker, please come in. We'll have some conversations about Commander-in-Chief. You have the floor now, specifically veterans who need jobs.
Let me just say two things about Congressman Paul's history. The U.S. government did two dramatic things after World War II. They created a GI Bill, which enabled literally millions of returning veterans to go to college for the very first time. My father, who was in the Second World War, went to college on a GI Bill. So there was an enormous expansion of opportunity that enabled them to integrate into a new emerging society. The second thing they did is they dramatically cut taxes. And the economy took off and grew dramatically, and it absorbed the workforce. So I would say we ought to both have a transition process for veterans to enable them to have a real advantage of getting a job when they come home, and we ought to have a very aggressive economic program of regulatory cuts and tax cuts in American energy so that the entire population is absorbed by getting back to about 4% unemployment, in which case virtually every veteran would have a very good job at the end of the transition period.
Let's turn to our audience now. Let's turn now and take a question from down in our audience tonight. Go ahead, sir.
My name is Sonny Cohn. I'm from Sevier County, Tennessee. My question to any of the candidates is, do any of you sincerely believe that Obamacare can either be repealed or reversed in its entirety?
Sure.
Mr. Speaker, you heard the skepticism. This is a Southern Republican voter, but he's skeptical. He knows how Washington works. He's watched Washington work. He's asked, can it be reversed in its entirety? You were the Speaker of the House. You understand how this works. How can it be repealed in this current political environment?
Well, let me say, first of all, if you've watched Washington and you're not skeptical, you haven't learned anything. I mean, this system is a total mess right now. Second, can you get it repealed in total? Sure. You have to elect a House, a Senate, and a president committed to that. It has to be a major part of the fall campaign. And I think that, frankly, on our side, with any of us, it's going to be a major part of the fall campaign. The American people are frightened of bureaucratic, centralized medicine. They deeply distrust Washington, and the pressure will be to repeal it. And a lot of what Governor Romney just said, I think, is actually pretty good, sound stuff for part of the replacement. I would always repeal all of it because I so deeply distrust the congressional staffs that I would not want them to be able to pick and choose which things they kept. But let me make one observation. You raised a good example. Why is President Obama for young people being allowed to stay on their parents' insurance until 26? Because he can't get any jobs for them to go out and buy their own insurance. I have an offer to the parents of America. Elect us, and your kids will be able to move out because they'll have work.
Mr. Speaker, it may seem like a while ago, Mr. Speaker, but Senator Santorum made the point, in his view, you don't have credibility on this.
No, what he said, which I found mildly amazing, was that he thought I would have a hard time debating Barack Obama over health care. Now, in fact, as Republican whip, I led the charge against Hillary Care in the House. As Speaker of the House, I helped preside over the conference which wrote into law his idea on health savings accounts, so I was delighted to help him get it to be a law. And the fact is, I helped found the Center for Health Transformation. I wrote a book called Saving Lives and Saving Money in 2002. You can go to healthtransformation.net, and you'll see hundreds of ideas, none of which resemble Barack Obama's program. So I'd be quite happy to have a 3-hour Lincoln Douglas-style debate with Barack Obama. I'd let him use a teleprompter. I'll just rely on knowledge. We'll do fine.
Mr. Speaker, take some time to respond. As you do so, what exactly did you mean doesn't have any of the knowledge for how to do something on this scale?
It's a very simple question. How big a scale of change do we want in Washington? I started working with Governor Reagan in 1974. I helped with Jack Kemp and others the development of supply-side economics in the late 70s. I participated in the 80s in an enormous project of economic growth. And with President Reagan's leadership, the American people created 16 million jobs. With President Reagan's leadership, the Soviet Union disappeared. I came back. I spent 16 years on a grandiose project called creating a Republican majority in the House. 16 years. And most of the Republican leaders in the House thought it was a joke. Even the night before the election, they thought it was a joke. And we created the first majority. We then worked for 2 solid years, reformed welfare. 2 out of 3 people went back to work or went to school. We ultimately became the first re-elected Republican majority since 1928. We then went on to cut taxes for the first time in 16 years, the largest capital gains tax cut in American history. In the 4 years I was Speaker, the American people created 11 million new jobs. We balanced the budget for 4 consecutive years, the only time in your lifetime. You're right. I think grandiose thoughts. This is a grandiose country of big people doing big things, and we need leadership prepared to take on big projects.
Quickly. Mr. Speaker, respond.
You know, campaigns are interesting experiences for all of us. And each of us writes a selective history that fits our interests. As a freshman in 1979, I moved to expel a member who was a convicted felon for the first time since 1917 against the wishes of our leadership. In the Page scandal in the 1980s, I moved and threatened to expel them unless they were punished much more severely against the wishes of the leadership. In the late 1980s, I initiated charges against the Speaker of the House, Jim Wright, at rather considerable risk for a backbench member. In 1990, I opposed the President of the United States of my own party when he tried to raise taxes. I said I actually thought he meant read my lips, and I led the fight against raising taxes, against the wishes of my party's leadership. I think long before Rick came to Congress, I was busy being a rebel, creating the Conservative Opportunity Society, developing a plan to win a majority in the Congress. And if you talk to anybody who worked at the Congressional Campaign Committee from December of 1978 on, for 16 years, I worked to help create the Republican Party nationally, to become a majority. I worked to create GOPAC, to train a majority. Those are just historic facts, even if they're inconvenient for Rick's campaign. This is probably a fundamental difference in our background and our experience. Under Jimmy Carter, we had the wrong laws, the wrong regulations, the wrong leadership, and we killed jobs. We had inflation. We went to 10.8% unemployment. Under Ronald Reagan, we had the right job, the right laws, the right regulators, the right leadership. We created 16 million new jobs. We then had 2 consecutive tax increases, one by a Republican, one by a Democrat. The economy stagnated. When I became Speaker, we went back to the Ronald Reagan playbook. Lower taxes, less regulation, more American energy, and 11 million jobs showed up. Now, I do think government can kill jobs, and I do think government can create the environment where entrepreneurs create jobs. And the truth is, you did very well under the rules that we created to make it easier for entrepreneurs to go out and do things. You'd have been much poorer if Jimmy Carter had remained president.
John Marcoux from the great city of Charleston. Gentlemen, when will you release your tax return specifically?
An hour ago.
Speaker Gingrich, is that good enough?
Look, he's got to decide, and the people of South Carolina have to decide. But if there's anything in there that is going to help us lose the election, we should know it before the nomination. And if there's nothing in there, why not release it? I mean, it's a very simple model. But as he's got to decide, it's his decision, and everybody's got to run their own campaign based on what they think is a reasonable risk. I released mine this evening. We also released the little small charitable foundation we have, so people can see what we do and how we did it and what our values are.
What is your take on SOPA, and how do you believe it affects Americans? For those who have not been following, that SOPA is the Stop Online Piracy Act. Crackdown on internet piracy, which is clearly a problem, but opponents say it's censorship. Full disclosure, our parent company, Time Warner, says we need a law like this because some of its products, movies, programming, and the like, are being ripped off online. Let me start with you, Mr. Speaker. There's 2 competing ends, 2 engines even of our economy here at odds on this. How do you deal with it?
Well, you're asking a conservative about the economic interest of Hollywood. And I'm weighing it. I'm weighing it. I'm not rushing in. I'm trying to think through all of the many fond left-wing people who are so eager to protect. On the other hand, you have virtually everybody who's technologically advanced, including, Google and YouTube and Facebook and all the folks who say this is going to totally mess up the internet, and the bill in its current form is written really badly and leads to a range of censorship that is totally unacceptable. Well, I favor freedom. And I think that if I think that we have a patent office, we have copyright law. If a company finds that it has genuinely been infringed upon, it has the right to sue but the idea that we're going to preemptively have the government start censoring the internet on behalf of giant corporations' economic interest strikes me as exactly the wrong thing to do.
But I just want to take this moment, after months and months of campaigning, maybe this is fun, maybe it isn't. Speaker Gingrich, I want to start with you. You're at this for months and you're out there. If there's one thing, just one thing in this campaign you could do over, what would it be?
I would skip the opening 3 months where I hired regular consultants and tried to figure out how to be a normal candidate. And I would just go straight at being a big ideas, big solutions, internet-based campaign from day one. It just didn't work. I mean, it's not who I am. I'm not capable of being a sort of traditional candidate. I'm a very idea-oriented candidate, and I think the internet makes it possible to create a momentum of ideas that's very, very exciting.
Hi, I would like to ask on the issue of amnesty of the illegal aliens, how would you secure that the American citizens would keep the jobs in line first for them?
Mr. Speaker, let's start with you on that. You mentioned the word amnesty. You have explained your position in this campaign, and as you know, some conservatives have said, no, Mr. Speaker, you say you can't deport, maybe it's 10, 11, some people say as high as 20 million people illegally in this country. You say it's unrealistic to deport them also. Some would have to be given a path to legal status, and as you know, many conservatives say, no, that's amnesty, Mr. Speaker.
Right. What I say, let's start with, I think you have to, first of all, control the border. I don't think you can pass a comprehensive bill because nobody trusts the government. So first you control the border. We have a bill that would have it controlled by January 1, 2014. And I'm prepared both to waive all federal regulations to get it built and controlled by 2014, and I'm prepared to move up to half the people who work for Homeland Security, they have 23,000 employees in Washington. I'd be prepared to move half of them to Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, if that's what it took to control the border. Second, I favor English as the official language of government, and I think that creates a continuity. Third, I would actually modernize the legal system of visas, because currently we make it too difficult to come here legally and too easy to come here illegally. Fourth, I would make it much easier to deport people. So if you're a non-citizen who belongs, say, to MS-13, an El Salvadorian gang, we should be able to get rid of you in 2 weeks, not 2 years, and we should have a much easier deportation. Fifth, I favor a guest worker program, and I would outsource it to American Express, Visa, or MasterCard, because they can run it without fraud, and the federal government's hopeless. So you want a system that is accurate and that is anti-fraud, which leads you then to be able to say to private employers, if you hire somebody who's illegal, we're going to have an enormous economic sanction, because there will be no excuse once you have a guest worker program that's legal. Then you get down to the question of people already here. I believe in what I just described, most of them will go home. The one group I singled out, and we do have a lively debate on this up here, there are people who've been here 25 years. They've been working, they've been paying their bills, they're married, they have children, they may have grandchildren, they may be in your church. Now, I don't think we're going to deport grandmothers and grandfathers who have 25 years of networking and relationships in a community. So I've suggested a World War II style draft board where local citizens would review the applications. You could only apply if you proved that you were financially responsible, you proved you had genuine family ties, and you had an American family sponsor you. You still wouldn't get amnesty, you wouldn't get citizenship, you would get a residency permit. In order to apply for citizenship, you would have to go back to your home country and get in line behind everybody else and be processed as a person from that country. But I think this is a doable, solvable, practical solution. And I think trying to deport grandmothers and grandfathers will never pass the Congress and would never be accepted by the American people. John, I just think if you're going to raise immigration, I want to make the point that on the very first day that I'm inaugurated, I will issue an executive order to the Justice Department to drop the lawsuits against South Carolina, Alabama, and Arizona. The federal government should enforce the law, not stop states from helping it enforce the law.
I think we have nodding heads. I assume we have agreement on that. But let's move on to another issue that came up in the campaign right here in South Carolina this week, and that's the life issue. Mr. Speaker, your campaign sent out a mailing to South Carolina Republicans across this state, essentially questioning Governor Romney's commitment on this issue, saying that he has changed his position on the abortion issue. If you'll recall, I moderated a debate back in New Hampshire in June. There were 7 candidates then. We have 4 tonight. But when this came up, we talked about it briefly, and then I asked, is this a fair game, an issue in this campaign, or is it case closed? Mr. Kaine, who was with us at the time, said case closed, and I paused. No one else took the opportunity to speak up. If it was case closed then, why is it a legitimate issue now?
You just said nobody else spoke. So nobody else said, yes, it's case closed. I mean, Herman Cain said it was case closed. The rest of us it wasn't a particular issue we wanted to fight that night. I mean, we are allowed to run our own campaigns, John. It's not an automatic requirement that we fit in your debate schedule. This is a very straightforward question. Governor Romney, and I accept this. I mean, Governor Romney has said that he had an experience in a lab and became pro-life, and I accept that. After he became pro-life, Romney Care does pay for tax-paid abortions. Romney Care has written into it Planned Parenthood, the largest abortion provider in the country, by name, does not have any right to life group written into it. He did appoint pro-abortion judges, and a branch of the government, which included his appointees, did agree to fund an abortion clinic for Planned Parenthood. All that occurred after he had become pro-life. Now, those are all facts which we validated, and it seems to me that's a legitimate part of the campaign, is to say, okay, if you're genuinely pro-life, how come these things are occurring? The fact is that I voted with Henry Hyde, who was the leading pro-life advocate in the House for a generation. I had a 98.6% pro-life voting record. The only one we disagreed on was welfare reform, which they scored for reasons we never understood. But otherwise, it was a perfect record on pro-life. When I was Speaker, we twice passed a bill that actually Rick was very active in to end partial birth abortion. Twice it was vetoed by Clinton, but twice we passed it. In the 2010 election, the freshman class has the highest percentage of pro-life members ever in history, and my job was to maximize their winning. And the fact is, we won a huge victory in 2010 with the largest number of pro-life members ever elected in a freshman class.
Make your case to the people of South Carolina in these final hours. Mr. Speaker.
Well, let me start. I want to thank CNN, and I want to thank the people of Charleston for a very, very interesting and very useful evening. And we have a real challenge. It is imperative that we defeat Barack Obama. This is, I believe, the most dangerous president of our lifetime. And if he is reelected after the disaster he has been, the level of radicalism of his second term will be truly frightening. But in addition to beating Obama, we have to have a team victory in the Senate and the House, and we have to have a principled victory. So the American people send a signal that in January of 2013, they want very dramatic, very deep change in Washington. I believe the only way to create the momentum is to be able to overcome his billion-dollar campaign with a series of debates which decisively convince the American people that a Saul Alinsky radical who is incompetent cannot be reelected, and I hope you will vote for me on Saturday as the person who could do that.
We are 5 days away from fundamentally transforming the United States of America.
The American people create jobs, not government.
Would you reappoint Ben Bernanke?
I would fire him tomorrow. I think the Fed should be audited. I'm not particularly worried about Governor Perry and Governor Romney frightening the American people when President Obama scares them every single day. When I was Speaker, we added 11 million jobs in a bipartisan effort, including welfare reform, the largest capital gain tax cut in history. We balanced the budget for 4 straight years. How would the country feel today at 4.2% unemployment? That's my credential. I'm going to outline a 21st century contract with America. It's going to be far bolder, far deeper, far more profound than what we did in 1994 or what I helped Jack Kemp and Ronald Reagan do in 1980. I am very much in favor of school choice. My personal preference would be to have a Pell Grant for K through 12 so that every parent could pick with their child any school they wanted to send them to. I think unemployment compensation should be tied directly to a training program so that that 99 weeks becomes an investment in human capital, giving us the best trained workforce in the world. But I believe it is fundamentally wrong to give people money for 99 weeks for doing nothing. The Congress this year, this next week, ought to repeal the Dodd-Frank bill. They ought to repeal the Sarbanes-Oxley bill. They ought to start creating jobs right now, because for those 14 million Americans, this is a depression now. Well, I'm frankly not interested in your effort to get Republicans fighting each other. I, for one, and I hope all of my friends up here, are going to repudiate every effort of the news media to get Republicans to fight each other to protect Barack Obama, who deserves to be defeated, and all of us are committed as a team. Whoever the nominee is, we are all for defeating Barack Obama. Nothing will turn America around more than election night when Barack Obama loses decisively.